At 78, Annie Denver, John's widow and lifelong partner, shattered decades of speculation with a confession fans always suspected John Denver wrote his most iconic hit, Take Me Home, Country Roads, without ever having set foot in West Virginia. The revelation came during a rare interview at her Colorado ranch, where, with steely clarity softened by emotion, she confirmed that the "almost heaven" lyric sprang from John's empathetic imagination rather than first-hand experience. For years, music enthusiasts dissected the song for its authenticity, debating whether the rolling hills and misty mountain memories were drawn from real Appalachian landscapes or lovingly crafted fiction. Now, Annie's admission transforms our understanding of the song's creation and offers fresh insight into John's artistic vision. Longtime collectors and casual listeners alike have long sensed a disconnect between the song's vivid geographical references and John's personal biography. Born Robert John Denver in Roswell, New Mexico, he spent his youth moving between Texas ranches and Colorado ski slopes, nurturing a love of nature that fueled his songwriting. West Virginia remained an abstract ideal inside his creative mind until he joined forces with songwriters Bill Danoff and Taffy Nevert in 1970. According to Danoff's own interviews, the phrase West Virginia Mountain Mama came almost as a placeholder, a melodic spark that felt just right. The trio fleshed out the verses referencing Blue Ridge and Shenandoah, weaving together regional names drawn from history books and road signs. Annie's confirmation finally proves what fans long theorized: the song's soul was true, even if its setting was imagined. For decades, rumor mills speculated on the veracity of John's Appalachian Odyssey. Travel writers claimed to spot him hitchhiking along the New River Gorge, while local radio stations in Charleston cheekily asked callers to phone in with eyewitness accounts. Yet no credible sighting ever materialized until a few weeks ago, when Annie shared a previously unseen photograph of John posing before the Greenbrier Hotel in 1969, a trip they took purely for vacation unrelated to songwriting. Even then, Annie stressed, he never ventured beyond the hotel grounds. His true inspiration stemmed from an innate wanderlust, the yearning for any place that felt like home. In confirming the rumor, Annie revealed the heart of the matter: John's gift lay not in lived experience, but in universal longing, a creative spark that burned brighter than any map location could supply. The confirmation also sheds new light on John and Annie's relationship. Married in 1967, they navigated the tumult of fame together, with Annie often anchoring John's idealism against the whirlwind of show business. In her interview, she admitted that she once pleaded with him to hold off on Country Roads until they could plan a proper tour of the region. John, driven by momentum and record executive pressure, chose instead to release the song in early 1971, watching in wonder as it climbed the charts. Annie's bittersweet confession recalls those private conversations, revealing that he had always intended to visit West Virginia after the single's success. Fate intervened when life on the road left little time for the trip, leaving the song to soar in absence of the journey itself. For the music industry, Annie's revelation carries symbolic weight. It underscores the distinction between artistic authenticity and historical accuracy. A song might resonate through truthful emotion rather than factual detail. Record executives, always wary of controversies undermining hit singles, now grapple with the notion that listeners cherish a heartfelt narrative more than literal accuracy. Academics in ethnomusicology have begun citing Country Roads in papers exploring the construction of place in song, noting Annie's confirmation as a pivotal case study. Even tourism boards in West Virginia have harnessed the lore, inviting fans to embark on pilgrimages tracing the imagined route of John's lyrics. Annie herself encourages such journeys, viewing them as celebrations of his legacy, regardless of his absence in the original landscape. As Annie reaches her 81st year, her confirmation reshapes how we view one of America's most beloved songs. Her candid voice, tempered by 7 decades of love loss and shared adventure, unveils a deeper truth about John Denver's artistry. He wrote from the heart first, the geography second. Fans now cherish Take Me Home, Country Roads, not only as a sing-along anthem but as a celebration of creative imagination. This revelation also opens doors for other songwriters to admit their inspired fictions, validating the power of art over literal fact. In the years to come, Annie's interview will stand as a milestone, an intimate testament to the alchemy of emotion, memory, and melody that defined John's career. And every time that chorus rings out, listeners will know that belonging can be found wherever the heart chooses to wander. In the days after Annie Denver's revelation, a tide of response swept across social media, journalism outlets, and academic forums alike. Fans tweeted their astonishment, some admitting they'd always suspected Country Roads was more poetic dream than travelogue. Others confessed new love for John's broader catalog. Suddenly, songs rooted in imagination felt richer with the knowledge that geography had never limited his muse. On Facebook, a group called Denver's Dreamscapes grew by thousands as participants shared photographs of places John never visited but nonetheless painted in song. One member from Ohio posted a photo of the Blue Ridge Mountains captioned, "I may not be West Virginia, I walk where John's words led me," illustrating how Annie's confirmation reframed appreciation rather than diminished it. Country music historians chimed in, reminding readers that literary license had long shaped Nashville's golden era. They noted that Hank Williams had written odes to towns he'd never seen, and that Loretta Lynn immortalized coal mines she only heard about through secondhand stories. In this light, John Denver's West Virginia fantasy fit a venerable tradition of songs that prioritize emotional truth over documentary precision. Yet Annie's admission prompted fresh discourse on the ethics of place-based songwriting. Should songwriters disclose when a locale is entirely imagined? Should listeners demand transparency? Or is the emotional authenticity of the lyrics sufficient? Ethnomusicology departments scheduled panels titled Mapping the Imagined Landscape, Country Roads and the Poetics of Place, probing how songs create cultural associations that outlive their factual underpinnings. Meanwhile, people with ties to West Virginia approached Annie's confession from another angle: tourism officials. The state's Economic Development Office had leveraged Country Roads for decades, inviting visitors to explore the real life behind the lyrics. Billboard ran a piece headlined, "From Song to State Brand," charting how the song boosted park attendance and local craft sales. Some wondered whether the myth's deflation risked dampening the song's promotional power. But West Virginia's governor embraced Annie's honesty, issuing a statement. "John Denver captured the spirit of our people, whether or not he ever roamed our hills. We welcome everyone to experience that spirit in person." He announced a series of Country Roads festivals, featuring tribute performances and historical tours, celebrating the song's enduring role in shaping external perceptions of Appalachian charm. Annie herself toured public radio stations to clarify her remarks, offering a finely balanced view. She spoke of John's deep respect for the songwriters who informed the lyrics, praising Bill Danoff and Taffy Nivert for their on-site research and local storytelling. "It was a collaboration of imagination and lived narrative," she explained. John provided the heart's longing, Bill and Taffy supplied the regional accents. She recounted how the trio had met in a rented house near Georgetown, brainstorming images on road maps and county atlases long before storytelling traveled across state lines. She urged fans to honor their combined effort, emphasizing that the song's magic stemmed from shared creativity rather than solo experience. Bill and Taffy issued their own reflection in a joint interview. Danoff recalled the moment the opening line appeared. "Almost heaven really came from a scrap of poetry in a tattered travel guide," he said. Nivert added, "Wad driven through Pennsylvania and Maryland and watched for signs of Shenandoah. The phrase sounded right, even if we hadn't set foot in every county." The duo's candor underscored the song's collective genesis, reinforcing Annie's point that the authenticity lay in emotional resonance. Their humility contrasted with some purists who demanded literal accuracy, shifting the conversation back to the creative process itself. In university classrooms, students wrote essays on the economy of authenticity in popular music, using Country Roads as a case study. Professors assigned readings on oral traditions' malleability and the function of regional identity in folk music. A student paper analyzed how Annie's confirmation reconfigured the song's symbolic capital, transforming West Virginia from a static backdrop into a dynamic site of imagined belonging. Another explored how fans' emotional investments in place-based narratives often blur the line between fact and feeling, demonstrating that a song's power rests in perceived truth rather than factual veracity. At the grassroots level, fans organized pilgrimages not just to actual West Virginia sites, but to counties and roads mentioned or implied in the lyrics. Some road trip blogs chronicled journeys tracing the imagined path from Blue Ridge Parkway overlooks to Shenandoah Valley vistas, a route reconstructed from Danoff and Nivert's original notes. These bloggers described poetic moments of convergence, watching mist roll over Appalachia while humming the refrain, finding meaning in the interplay of song and landscape despite John's absence. Photographers posted portfolios with captions like, "I walked John's invented path and found my own country roads," capturing the way the song's emotional geography had taken on tangible form. Even the BBC seized on Annie's interview for a cultural feature examining the broader phenomenon of imaginary homelands. The program compared John Denver's case to literary examples like James Joyce's Dublin, a city rendered both real and mythic by narrative. British journalists marveled that a simple folk country tune from an American pop star could spark such extensive debate on the nature of place in storytelling. They interviewed expatriate Appalachian musicians who said they appreciated the global spotlight on their region, regardless of its fictionalized origin, valuing the song's capacity to draw attention to overlooked communities. Back at her Colorado ranch, Annie reflected on the ongoing ripple effect. She had braced for controversy, but found instead a nuanced revaluation of John's artistry. "He wrote from the heart, and the heart doesn't follow state lines," she often said. On the ranch's porch, she passed along recipes for peach preserves to journalists who visited, reinforcing the idea that home can be as much a flavor or a melody as a physical address. Her confession had unsettled conventional notions but enriched them, inviting listeners to celebrate emotional authenticity over cartographic accuracy. As Section 2 draws to a close, the once tantalizing rumor about John Denver's lack of personal ties to West Virginia has evolved into a broader meditation on imagination, collaboration, and the transformative power of song. Annie's confirmation did more than answer a decades-old question. It illuminated how artists transcend the boundaries of geography to craft universal experiences. And for every country road winding through real hills and valleys, there now exists a parallel route in the human psyche. A route charted by longing, memory, and the creative leap that turns a place into poetry. Annie's confession ignited a cascade of projects that spanned music, academia, and tourism, each one driven by the power of imagined place. Within a week, Annie issued a public call for songwriters to submit lyrics about landscapes they'd never seen but felt in their bones. Over 5,000 entries poured in. Appalachian teenagers longing for hollows they'd only read about, city poets in Mumbai conjuring moonlit mountain passes, and European folk singers dreaming of Shenandoah dawns. Annie assembled panels of folklorists, lyricists, and digital curators to sift the submissions, selecting the most evocative verses for a streaming anthology called Imagined Roads. Fans could hear these new songs alongside John's original demo of Country Roads, forging a bridge between his poetic leap and their personal yearnings. Meanwhile, scholars seized upon Annie's revelation as a case study in narrative authenticity. The University of North Carolina's Ethnomusicology Department launched a seminar titled Poetic Geographies, guiding students through fieldwork in Fayetteville and Morgantown. Participants interviewed locals about the emotional weight of a song never literally grounded in their hills, then wrote papers on how collective memory and lyrical fantasy intersect. Similar programs sprang up at Appalachian State and Marshall University, all exploring how John's unvisited West Virginia became a real emotional landscape for millions. Professors noted that Annie's admission reframed the song not as misrepresentation, but as an invitation to project personal meaning onto universal themes of belonging. On the tourism front, West Virginia's Department of Commerce unveiled the Almost Heaven Trail, a network of scenic byways tracing Danoff and Nivert's research route rather than John's actual travels. Pullouts were named after key lyrical phrases, Misty Mountaintop View and Shenandoah Vista, each equipped with interpretive signs and audio stations featuring Annie recounting John's creative process. Local artisans contributed handcrafted benches and waymarkers etched with journal excerpts, while nearby inns offered country roads packages including a copy of Annie's interview and donated proceeds to Appalachian music scholarships. The project turned a decades-old rumor into an economic and cultural boon, celebrating imagined landscapes as much as physical ones. Art museums joined the movement with mixed media exhibits. At the Country Music Hall of Fame, Mapping the Dream, displayed John's original lyric sheets alongside regional maps annotated with editor's notes. Large format photographs of Colorado Rockies juxtaposed against West Virginia's Greenbrier River highlighted the song's creative hybridity. Visitors could step into VR stations that overlaid John's lyrics onto streaming drone footage of both states, experiencing how emotional truth can transcend geographic fidelity. Panel discussions featured Danif Nevert and Appalachian historians debating the ethics of place-based writing, a testament to the song's lasting complexity. In Nashville, songwriter conferences titled Truly's The Art of Imagined Song brought together writers across genres. Casey Musgraves, Tyler Childers, and Brandi Carlile shared their own struggles balancing literal experience with narrative invention. Workshops guided aspiring composers through exercises in empathy-driven world building, encouraging them to craft characters and settings by tapping into universal emotions. One breakout session, Finding Home in Words, invited participants to write a chorus about a place they'd never set foot in. An exercise that, like John's original creative spark, proved both daunting and liberating. Documentary filmmaker Ava DuVernay traveled to Annie's Colorado ranch to film segments for Almost Heaven, The Untold Story. Slated for release on a major streaming platform, the crew captured Annie's polished but raw reflections, her hands turning the pages of travel guides that inspired John's verses. Archival footage of the trio's Georgetown sessions played alongside contemporary interviews with West Virginia marching bands who had adopted Country Roads as a fight song. The film highlighted how Annie's revelation had reframed John's anthem as both invention and tribute, affirming that emotional landscapes can resonate far deeper than physical ones. Even the corporate world embraced this creative renaissance. A major outdoor apparel brand launched a Dreamers Returns campaign, pairing an acoustic re-recording of Country Roads with footage of global fans exploring local wilds they'd only previously imagined. Proceeds funded community conservation grants in Appalachia and the Rockies, two places linked by John's poetic bridge. In boardrooms, executives cited Annie's confession as an example of authentic storytelling's power to foster genuine engagement, praising her willingness to share the song's imaginative core. As Section 3 draws to a close, Annie Denver's simple admission has blossomed into a cultural movement. By confirming John Denver's lyrical fantasy, she has not only demystified one of popular music's most beloved songs, but also sparked a global exploration of how art shapes our sense of home. His Country Roads endure not just as an anthem of place, but as a testament to the emotional landscapes we carry within, roads of the heart that lead us back to ourselves. By autumn, Almost Heaven, movement had branched into unexpected territories: education, philanthropy, and digital innovation. Universities in Appalachia and beyond added modules on the song's curious backstory to music and cultural studies programs. At Marshall University, students enrolled in Songs of Place and Imagination analyzed Annie's interview alongside Bill Danif's earliest lyric drafts, exploring how the song's mythic West Virginia was constructed with emotional honesty rather than cartographic precision. A collaborative research paper from West Virginia University and the University of Colorado examined how John's outsider perspective, later confirmed by Annie, invited listeners to project their own memories onto the lyrics, forging a shared sense of home across diverse geographies. Philanthropically, the Annie Denver Foundation launched Roads to Renewal, a grant initiative funding community storytelling projects in rural counties. Local groups received microgrants to record oral histories and produce folk song recordings, capturing voices that paralleled John's imagined narrative. In Pocahontas County, a volunteer collective recorded elders recounting 19th-century logging camp ballads, while in Rowan County, high school choirs performed newly penned anthems about modern Appalachian life. Annie visited several project sites, sharing insights on how a single song, born in imagination, could spur real-world efforts to preserve cultural heritage. She often told residents, "John's Road was never on a map, but your stories allow us to walk it for real." Digital innovators joined the movement with interactive installations. A major streaming platform unveiled Country Roads VR, where users could virtually traverse curated Appalachian landscapes while listening to contextual commentary from Annie, Danif, and Nevert. As the avatar climbed misty mountain overlook or meandered along the Greenbrier River, Pop-up panels displayed original travel guide annotations that inspired John's lyrics. User data confirmed high-engagement viewers spent an average of 20 minutes in the virtual experience, frequently pausing to replay verses at scenic waypoints. The project demonstrated how Annie's confirmation had redefined country roads as a living, evolving narrative, ripe for new technological interpretations. Meanwhile, public radio stations across the country devoted special segments to the revelation's ripple effects. NPR's Morning Edition interviewed Appalachian entrepreneurs who credited the song's enduring popularity and Annie's big reveal with bolstering tourism and small business growth. A South Charleston cafe reported a 40% increase in gift shop sales of Country Roads memorabilia after the Almost Heaven Trail debuted. Radio historians traced the song's chart legacy, noting that it had peaked at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1971, but now continued to chart annually on folk and Americana playlists thanks to renewed interest in its origins. On the documentary front, Ava DuVernay's Almost Heaven, The Untold Story, premiered at the Sundance Film Festival to critical acclaim. The film wove Annie's Colorado Ranch interview with the ground footage of West Virginia towns that had embraced their fictional yet beloved anthem. Viewers saw Blackwater Falls State Park decks lined with fans singing along, and small town parades where children marched under banners reading, "Country Roads Welcome All." The documentary's central thesis, place can be as much a product of the heart as it is of geography, resonated widely, earning nominations for Best Music Documentary and sparking discussions on the ethics of cartographic imagination in art. Back in Nashville, the Songwriters Hall of Fame hosted a sold-out panel titled Imagine Reality's Ethics and Artistry in Song. Moderated by Roseanne Cash, the discussion featured Annie Danoff and Nevert alongside songwriters like Rodney Crowell and Gillian Welch. They debated whether disclosing a song's invented setting alters its emotional punch. Danoff argued that transparency deepens connection. When Annie shared the truth, "It didn't make West Virginia less real to me. It made the song more profound." Welch countered that some songs thrive on mystery, inviting each listener to find their own verdant hills. Audience Q&A reflected this tension. Half the room defended poetic license, half championed honesty. But all agreed on one point. Annie's revelation had sparked a vital conversation about songmaking in the modern era. Even the Grammy organization took notice, fast-tracking a special category at the upcoming Americana Awards, Best Song of Imagination, honoring compositions that evoke place through emotional veracity rather than literal experience. The inaugural shortlist included reinterpretations of Country Roads, recorded by emerging artists in Ghana, Japan, and Brazil, versions that anchored John's universal themes in new cultural landscapes. Annie accepted the award in a live televised ceremony, dedicating it to the dreamers whose hearts map every road they walk, and performed a stripped-down rendition of the song with a choir of global fans joining via satellite. As 2024 closed, Annie reflected on the movement she'd helped ignite. What began as a simple admission that John had never wandered West Virginia's hills had blossomed into a global exploration of the spaces songs create in our minds and souls. The rumor, she confirmed, became a catalyst for education, economic renewal, artistic innovation, and heartfelt storytelling. In sharing the truth behind Country Roads, Annie Denver had not diminished the song's magic, she had multiplied it, weaving a tapestry of real connections that spanned states and continents. And in doing so, she proved that the most powerful roads are those we journey in our hearts. A lesson John wrote into song, and Annie carried forward into a new era of possibility. As winter settled across the Rockies and Appalachians, Annie Denver found herself listening to new echoes of her late husband's song in the most surprising places. City subways, seaside boardwalks, and mountaintop lodges halfway around the world. Teachers in Seoul used Country Roads to teach English idioms, samba bands in Rio de Janeiro adapted the melody into dancehall rhythms, and children in rural Kenya sang translated verses during morning assemblies. Annie marveled at how John's imagined landscape had become a global canvas for hope and belonging. "He never saw those Blue Ridge Hills," she said in one radio interview, "yet they belong to every heart willing to wander." Meanwhile, the Annie Denver Foundation's Roads to Renewal grants entered a second phase. Local councils in West Virginia and Colorado nominated community storytellers to receive further funding, enabling them to record digital archives of folk tales, pioneer journals, and contemporary songs. In Greenbrier County, a collective of young musicians used their grant to purchase recording equipment, producing a podcast series titled Appalachian Voices Unheard, each episode weaving local history into musical vignettes. In Jefferson County, Colorado, ranch families recorded cowpoke ballads and cowboy poetry, stories that resonated with John's own cowboy leanings. Annie attended annual award ceremonies for these fellows, presenting handcrafted plaques engraved with John's lyrics and the words, "Dream Beyond Borders." Educational initiatives flourished in tandem. At West Virginia University, the Marshall Center for Appalachian Studies launched a traveling workshop called Map Your Heart, where students created multimedia presentations pairing their personal memories with John Denver's lyrics. One student projected images of her grandmother's coal mining village alongside verses from Country Roads, exploring the intersection between myth and lived experience. Professors placed Annie's interview at the heart of the curriculum, prompting students to debate whether knowing the song's fiction diminished its emotional power or amplified it by inviting active audience participation in crafting meaning. On stage, a new generation of artists paid homage to Annie's revelation. At the Americana Honors and Awards, Lily and Madeline performed a haunting cover of Take Me Home, Country Roads, dressed in vintage attire and accompanied by Appalachian dulcimers and penny whistles. Their arrangement emphasized minor, key refrains, suggesting the bittersweet tug between nostalgia and imaginative escape. Following their set, they dedicated the performance to Annie, broadcast to millions of viewers who watched live. Annie watched from her ranch kitchen, wiping tears as she whispered, "He would have loved their voices." Tourism boards deepened their partnerships with the Annie Denver Foundation. In partnership with local artisans, they launched Heartscapes Trails, brochures featuring routes that connected places John had sung about, Shenandoah, Blue Ridge, to nearby cultural attractions. Travelers who followed the printed maps discovered hidden craft markets, storytellers' gatherings, and open mic nights organized by grant recipients. And breakfast hosts offered, Almost Heaven, packages including Annie's memoir, a copy of the Imagined Roads anthology, and tickets to local folk performances. Visitors reported an immersive experience by tracing John's creative itinerary rather than his physical one. They uncovered layers of community heritage. Digital innovators continued to explore the song's frontier. A major online museum unveiled Echoes of Almost Heaven, a web portal housing interviews with fans and scholars, VR tours of grant-funded projects, and a crowdsourced map plotting every Country Roads cover recorded worldwide. Contributors pinned videos of street musicians playing in Mumbai alleys, Japanese high school bands performing on rooftop terraces, and Afrobeat artists adapting the melody with congas and electric guitars. Each pin represented a new node in the song's ever-expanding network, evidence that Annie's confirmation had liberated John's melody to roam freely across continents. Publishing ventures followed suit. A coffee table book titled Mapping Country Roads featured essays from anthropologists, photographers, and songwriters reflecting on Annie's revelation. Photo essays juxtaposed West Virginia's mist, shrouded hollows with Colorado's sunlit messes, accompanied by transcriptions of lyrical imagery that bridged both worlds. A companion volume of creative writing invited readers to submit their own imagined verses, poems, or short stories inspired by places they'd never seen but felt compelled to describe. Annie contributed the book's introduction, writing, "Embrace the roads your heart leads you down, even if no map can show the way." In music therapy circles, clinicians discovered new applications for the song's reframed narrative. Group sessions used Country Roads as a catalyst for guided imagery. Participants closed their eyes and imagined embracing the almost heaven of their own lives, family reunions, childhood meadows, or even the simple comfort of a friend's porch. Therapists noted measurable improvements in mood and anxiety markers, attributing the song's effectiveness to its universal themes, rather than geographic specificity. Annie learned of these findings in a letter from a music therapist who wrote, "Your revelation deepened our work. Now patients can reclaim the song for their own healing journeys." As the second anniversary of Annie's interview approached, public radio stations planned commemorative broadcasts. NPR revisited the story with updated interviews alongside contributors from the Imagined Roads Anthology. BBC Radio reflected on its original feature, inviting listeners to call in with their personal country roads pilgrimages. In Australia, ABC Radio produced a half-hour documentary tracing the song's Indigenous Australian covers, exploring how Aboriginal musicians wove their own Dreamtime motifs into John's refrain. Annie listened by satellite on her porch, feeling the ripple effect of one confession expand into a chorus of human connection. Looking ahead, Annie announced a final series of Almost Heaven Conversations, virtual events pairing songwriters, folklorists, and community leaders in dialogue about the power of imagined place. Each session would conclude with a new musical premiere, unreleased demo fragments from John's private vault, now mixed with contributions from Grant Fellows. These digital salons promise to bring the movement full circle, uniting John's creative spark with the voices his music had inspired. Annie described them as the last gifts we'll share to honor John's legacy of imagination. By the close of Section 5, Annie Denver's simple, heartfelt confession has blossomed into a global tapestry of art, scholarship, tourism, and healing. Her decision to confirm John Denver's creative fiction did not diminish the song's magic. It multiplied it, empowering communities everywhere to discover their own horizons. Take Me Home, Country Roads remains an anthem not of place, but of possibility, a testament to the roads we chart with our hearts and the homes we build in our dreams. With winter's thaw giving way to spring's first blooms, Almost Heaven movement shows no sign of fading. Annie Denver continues to shepherd its next evolution, launching a limited film series called Echoes on the Trail. Each episode spotlights a different community project funded by her foundation, Folklore Recordings in Webster County, a youth songwriting camp in Eagle County, and a mobile storytelling unit bringing lyric writing workshops to remote schools. Viewers follow local residents as they connect John Denver's imagined verses to their real hometown experiences, discovering that the heart's landscape can be far wider than any map. Annie narrates each segment from her Colorado porch, drawing parallels between the original spark behind Country Roads and the fresh creative embers stoked across the world. Meanwhile, the Annie Denver Foundation's board expanded to include young artists who emerged from its first grant cycles. They bring new visions, a digital archive that crowdsources fan interpretations of John's lyrics in 28 languages, and an augmented reality app that lets users pin personal memories to virtual mile markers along a stylized Country Roads highway. When you point your phone at any vinyl copy of the song, it overlays audio clips of local singers performing their own cover alongside the original track. These innovations ensure that John Denver's music remains a living dialogue, inviting each generation and every region to leave its imprint on a song once born of pure imagination. On the academic front, a landmark anthology titled Mapping Imagined Homelands is set for publication. Edited by scholars from West Virginia University, the University of Colorado, and Oxford Center for the Creative Process, it collects essays on country roads as a case study in creative license. Contributors analyze everything from cognitive studies on nostalgia to economic assessments of tourism spikes triggered by imagined geographies. One chapter recounts a field experiment where participants blindly matched morning dew samples from Colorado and West Virginia, discovering that emotional priming by the song's lyrics affected their taste perceptions. Annie contributed a foreword reflecting on how a single confession unlocked countless doors to interdisciplinary insight. Town halls and fan conventions also embraced the movement's spirit. Imagined Roads Live gatherings draw songwriters, historians, and community leaders to swap stories and perform new lyrical homages. Panels discuss best practices for preserving oral traditions, while open mic nights encourage attendees to sing about places they've never seen. At a recent gathering in Chattanooga, a college student debuted a bilingual duet, English and Cherokee, based on a journal line John Denver once scribbled. "Every mountain is a story waiting to be climbed." The performance earned a standing ovation and underscored the movement's power to bridge cultural boundaries through shared imaginative landscapes. On the tourism front, regional planners in Appalachia and the Rockies collaborated on a dual-state scenic byway dubbed Denver's Dream Corridor. GPS-enabled apps guide road trippers through curated audio tours featuring archival recordings of John's vocals alongside new works by grant recipients. Users can pause at overlooks and listen to personal anecdotes from local storytellers, forging an emotional link between the song's poetic imagery and real-life vistas. Hotels along the road offer Songwriters Retreat packages, complete with songwriting workshops led by guest artists and cabin stays designed to mimic the cozy simplicity John once envisioned in his lyrics. The music industry also took stock of the movement's long-term impact. Major labels now audit artists' vaults, searching for demo tapes and private journals that might one day serve as catalysts for similar creative rediscoveries. Estates of departed musicians from Bob Marley to Kate Bush began cataloging unreleased material with an eye toward ethical, artist-focused posthumous releases, an approach inspired by Annie's handling of John Denver's secret West Virginia origins. Music business programs added modules on transparent stewardship, teaching future executives how to balance commercial interests with respect for an artist's authentic vision. As for Annie, she remains the movement's guiding star. Near her ranch's fire pit one evening, she confided to a visiting journalist, "I once worried that admitting John never roamed those hills would break the spell. Instead, it set free a wave of creativity I never imagined." At 78, her own voice has become a beacon, gentle yet unwavering, urging artists and audiences alike to embrace the roads their hearts map out. She envisions a final project, a global anthology of country roads, covers compiled into a 50-track release, each version reflecting a unique cultural lens. Proceeds would fund a permanent songwriting wing at the Musicians Hall of Fame. At the movement's heart lies a simple truth: we all carry inner landscapes shaped by memory, longing, and imagination. Annie's confession about John Denver's fictional journey crystallized that insight into a worldwide phenomenon. With each workshop, digital innovation, and cross-cultural adaptation, the song's legacy grows richer, proving that the borders we draw in our minds are as real, if not more so, than any physical boundary. As new voices add their verses to the tapestry John began, Annie watches with quiet pride, knowing she unlocked doors not merely down country roads, but deep into the human spirit. And in that endless open road lies the enduring magic of his song, a place no map can capture, yet every heart can call home.